So United Nations in New York has never declared an international standard for what negotiation is or isn't. So you may perceive negotiation as playing poker. I may perceive negotiation as playing tennis. So could you imagine we just show up and don't talk about how we're going to play this game, and you're sitting there playing poker and I'm just sitting with the racket and throwing around in the air? And a lot of negotiation in reality starts that way until people finally figure out we're playing chess, right? So why not talk about that as well from the beginning, just agreeing what game are we actually playing right now? It saves a lot of time out there in reality when you start doing that.
From humble beginnings, Insurance Claim HQ has grown to one of the largest property casualty firms in the country. We didn't do it alone, and you shouldn't either. Every week, we're talking to claims professionals and top experts from all over, all to help you grow your business and make you stronger. Let's level up together. I'm Galen Hair. Welcome to the Level Up Claims Podcast.
The way we negotiate is changing. And if you're not paying attention, you're already behind. Today, I'm sitting down with Keld Jensen, global negotiation expert and author of the Smart Negotiator. We're talking about how AI is transforming deal making, how to blend data with instinct, and what the smartest negotiators are doing right now in order to stay ahead. If you're making deals at any part of your business, and let's face it, you are, this one's a must listen. Let's dive in. Dr. Jensen, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so negotiation. We're gonna jump into it. We're gonna jump into it pretty quick because I think personally that our listeners are really interested in negotiation since it's so important to what they do as public adjusters and contractors. But before we do, I have to know, you have made a sterling career on analyzing negotiation, making recommendations on negotiation, actually studying existing and past negotiations. What drew you to the subject matter? How did you get into it?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. We have to go back to 1998. I was a CEO of a public tech company, and I thought I was a great negotiator. But I was actually unconsciously incompetent. You know, you don't know what you don't know. And so what happened, the short version is that we hired a consultant that became my partner later on, who came in, and in less than 2 hours, and I repeat, less than 120 minutes, he moved me from unconsciously incompetent to consciously incompetent. And that's actually a terrible wake-up call, because suddenly you realize that what you didn't know, you don't know. So it made me realize very quickly that, hey, this is actually scary. I thought I was a great negotiator. I was in charge of thousands of people, major corporation, sitting in huge negotiation every day. And in reality, I didn't know what I was doing. So I went back home and told my family, you know what, I quit. I have to go out there and try and change the world. And that's what I'm doing today. I don't want to make it sound religious, but basically that's my mission, waking up every morning and trying to make people understand that we can do so much better.
Was it really that quick for you that you just had that aha moment and told your family you were going to leave?
It was a complete wake-up call for me. I was basically shocked. I still remember it as like it was yesterday, because I seriously thought I was very good at it. And suddenly I realized I was horrible. And unfortunately, that's the case for, obviously there's a lot of great negotiators out there, but there's seriously a lot of negotiators, especially executives, that feel they're very good at it. And in reality, they never had any formal training. They never studied it. They never had any basis, and they're just doing it. They're just winging it. And the worst thing you can do is just wing it, because I don't feel negotiation is an art. If it was an art, we will all be born being a great negotiator. That's not the case. It's a skill. We can study it. We can become better.
I could not agree more. And, I don't know if you can ever master an art, right? I think you can. I don't think you can ever master a skill for that matter. You can get very close. And I think very few have gotten as close as you have. You've written. So before these podcasts, I like to read the books of our guests. And with you, it was impossible because you've written 27 books on negotiation, trust, and communication. I did dig into the Smart Negotiator, but you've written such a body of work that I would have had to set aside the last month and a half to read everything you've written.
Right.
But let's talk a little bit, I guess, about the Smart Negotiator. What was the inspiration behind that book?
Again, we have to take a step back. In 2019, and that, in the world of artificial intelligence, that's 300 years. I started collaborating with an organization called World Commerce and Contracting, which is a nonprofit organization with 80,000 members globally within legal, procurement, contract management, negotiators, what have you. And we started actually playing around, studying technology and negotiation. This was before you had large language models. So we basically replaced technology with human beings who pretended to be technology. That was the first small step. Just to try and compare negotiation with and without technology. And then when ChatGPT came around, I was applauding because now we had the opportunity of starting a real study. And we did. So what we did very quickly was we had hundreds of simulations globally, where we had teams of two negotiating with other teams of two virtually. And we divided into three groups. One exercise was they were negotiating traditionally, like human beings without technology. We had a second group where one side was using ChatGPT and the other side wasn't. And we had a third group where both sides were trained in ChatGPT and using AI and negotiating with AI. And then we compared these hundreds of simulation with the same content, the same time to prepare, the same time to conduct that negotiation. And the outcome was astonishing. I was actually shocked. The difference between the outcome of these three negotiations was remarkable. So make it very brief, and obviously it's explained in more depth in the book. But when we looked at the negotiators who negotiated traditionally without the use of technology, none of them managed to reach a deal within the allocated time. They were badly prepared. They didn't capture the value in general that was available, and they were not very open, transparent, and trusting. If we just compare that to the third group, where both of them were using AI, and all of those negotiations managed to close within time, they managed to capture almost all the value. They were way better prepared. And here comes the big surprise. The level of trust, transparency, openness, and collaboration went through the roof. So, when people are saying AI is actually creating less of a connection between people and is not promoting trust, well, our research that we published in a peer-reviewed research paper shows the complete opposite. People were more trusting, more open, more collaborative the second both sides were using AI. So anyway, back to answering your question. The reason that I decided to write the book was really based on that study, because that study was so remarkable. So I was thinking, this is electricity for negotiation. It's the same level. It's so important people understand that we have to embrace AI in negotiations.
And I think that's such an important point you make. And let's come back to that. Why don't we shelve that topic for a second? Because I suspect once we get into AI and technology and negotiation, well, that'll be the rest of our time. I want to go back, if you remember it, and if not, we can talk about a different case study. But you did a case study on the Smart Aqua negotiation, I noticed. And in that one, I think one side, just through their negotiation skills, was able to add like 23% in value to the contractor, which was wild. So, but that was not a super tech or smart negotiation as I understood it from your case study. No. So what are some things that happen there for some of our folks at home that tend to use traditional negotiation? What were some takeaways, some things you thought were done just very well?
Yeah, no, when you're working with the concepts we created, it's actually an award-winning mathematical model, and it's not rocket science. It's really very simple. But what we have discovered, we've been looking at 35,000 negotiations since 1998, and this is way before AI and technology is not involved in that. And what we discovered is that if two parties are negotiating, they might agree, they might shake hands, sign the contract, leave the conference room. But in majority of cases, they're actually leaving up to 42% of the value on the table. This is what we could also call asymmetric value. And it's basically the difference between your cost and my value, or my cost and your value. Giving you a very simple example. Delivery time. Let's say you call me and say, hey, Keld, we need to change delivery time. Before we get into an argumentation whether we should change delivery time or not, we should sit down and talk about what's your cost or benefit by changing delivery time. What is my cost and benefit of changing that delivery time? And if it's actually, if our conclusion is that my cost of changing delivery time is below your value, we should change it. If it's not the case, we shouldn't do it. And I'm actually a big fan of data and numbers in negotiation because they always tell the truth. So when you're looking for finding that asymmetric value, difference between your value and my cost, or the opposite way around, it will immediately tell you what direction you should go in negotiation. Now, the challenge is that it requires transparency and honesty and trust. And it sounds easy, but that's complicated in real life, right? Because, you just don't step into negotiation and say, could we have 100% transparency and trust in each other? It's not like the other party goes, okay, and then you got it, right? It requires something. So that is the biggest challenge. But if you want to capitalize up to 42% of that value in a negotiation, this is a guarantee from my side. I'm talking about it in the Smart Negotiator again, because it's such an important topic. If you want to capture that additional value, you have to focus on developing that relationship to exchange those informations.
And that makes sense. So specifically, what kind of things did they do to develop trust in that negotiation that you witnessed?
One of the things we recommend, and I know for some people it may sound weird, is actually putting trust on the agenda. So when we work in real life negotiation as advisors for a client or in trainings, we actually tell them, so we have an agenda. On the agenda, we write whatever, I don't have the checklist for these 4.5 things have to be on the agenda, but there's always the happy to see you, who's who, have we got the authority to negotiate? And then we actually throw trust in there and saying, now we need to talk about trust. And the fun part is that when I mentioned that to some organizations, they say, you know what, we can't talk about trust. It's like a taboo, But I'm saying, why? It's not about that we're lacking trust in the counterpart, but we should allow to verbalize what happens if you, for instance, start trusting me less for whatever reason. You should tell me that. It should be okay for you to say, Keld, you know what you just said there actually makes me have a little bit less faith and trust in what you're saying. And perhaps I didn't do it on purpose. Perhaps it was a miscommunication, which happens a lot. So it's nice to talk about it. And if you actually been setting up the role of engagement, what we call rules of the game, before we start negotiating, it makes life easier. So one of the things, just to wrap this up, we also recommend is actually that we start negotiating on how to negotiate before we actually start the actual negotiation. I know it sounds weird.
No, you say that. Process before substance. You say negotiate the process first.
Exactly. And the reason I'm saying it is because, United Nations in New York has never declared an international standard for what negotiation is or isn't. So you may perceive negotiation as playing poker. I may perceive negotiation as playing tennis. So could you imagine we just show up and don't talk about how we're going to play this game, and you're sitting there playing poker and I'm just sitting with the racket and throwing around in the air? And a lot of negotiation in reality starts that way until people finally figure out we're playing chess, right? So why not talk about that as well from the beginning, just agreeing what game are we actually playing right now? It saves a lot of time out there in reality when you start doing that.
Yeah, I agree. When I first thought about this, I was trying to think about this in the context of like our listeners, right? Public adjusters and contractors. And I thought to myself, they are never going to get on the phone with an insurance adjuster and say, how do you want to do this negotiation? What's the process, right? And I stand by that. I don't think they will. But I thought through this more, and they absolutely should. And then I started to think through as a lawyer and conversations I had as a younger lawyer, where I would call to negotiate. And, some of the best negotiators I dealt with would say, how do you want to do this? Is this something where you want to go back and forth 10 times and go to our clients?
Exactly.
Or did you want to kind of cut down to where you need to be and where I need to be, and we'll see if this overlaps? I don't care. If you're billing hours and you need more time, I'll go with your process, but I need to know which process we're doing. And every time, if I said, let's cut to it, they cut right to it, right? But it allowed them to kind of manipulate, it's not the right word, adapt their strategy to the process we were using. And I don't know how many adjusters or contractors are using this skill, but I think it's huge. Get the process sorted first. And what kind of results do you see when the process is negotiated first?
Well, first and foremost, it's not magic. As I completely agree with you, it will not always work. There's a saying: you can drag the horse to the water, but you can't force it to drink, right? So if you're sitting with a counterpart who don't get it, don't want to do it, don't have an interest, or is not allowed to do it, well, you can't do it, right? But in my experience, and we have been doing this in thousands of cases, you will succeed in a huge number of cases where the counterpart actually goes, well, that makes sense. Let's do it. So one of the things that we also talk about, which is important, is that you need to have a negotiation strategy. And, quite often when I work with a new client, and we typically work with a Fortune 500 organization or what have you, and I like to tease people. So I often start the meeting by saying, could you please quickly share what is your official negotiation strategy in your organization? And in many cases, what happens is the counterpart will go, because there isn't any. which is actually a bit scary, right? Because they have a communication strategy or research and development strategy or an HR strategy. There's a lot of strategies, but not a negotiation strategy. So I'm saying, so you have 60,000 employees and probably half of them are negotiating professionally on behalf of your company. So do you have 30,000 people that runs out there and do it in 30,000 different ways? They don't know. So one of the first things you have to do, beside everything else we talked about, is actually define how do you want to negotiate. And very quickly, we divide it in 3 boxes. Zero-sum game, I'm sure all your listeners know that. Positional, I win at your expense or you win at my expense. Partnership, which is the first step on collaboration. And then the third step we have developed called Smartnership. We could also have named it Partnership version 2.0. The big difference between Smartnership and Partnership is in Smartnership, we have discussed the role of engagement. We're looking for economics. We're working purposely in what we call trust currency, so generating that trust. And last but not least, we are also defining how we should negotiate and creating that strategy. So it's very important. For instance, back to the case you just brought up, it's very important. And in that case, they did it. They have negotiated on how to negotiate before they actually step in there and agreed we want to do it in a collaborative manner.
Yeah, and they very much followed that partnership process that I think you've laid out. And guys, again, Dr. Jensen's written about this, so feel free to jump into any of his books. He lays out a number of these strategies we're talking about, but I made you a promise and I want to keep it, which is that we're going to come back to AI and technology and negotiation because I think it's so important. And I want to make sure we don't lose that time. So while I've got you and you're here, let's talk more about that. You talked about some of the results we saw, some of the data we saw, but what does that look like in the real world using AI and technology to engage in a negotiation? What kind of things should be taken into account?
Let me give you an example I've been allowed to share. It's with ConocoPhillips, one of our clients. They had a drilling department up in Alaska, and they were working with a sub-supplier. They had to find some money. They were outsourcing an assignment, and the sub-supplier was just too expensive. So they embraced the philosophy of partnership, went out there, and one of the things they did was using AI to run the existing contract through AI and not just asking AI. AI knows me and my philosophy. So what you could do is one of the things you should do when you're using AI in general is actually ask AI to be somebody. So you could say, in this case, please be Dr. Keld Jensen and work with the partnership philosophy analyzing this contract. So they did that. And they asked the AI system to bring out variables that could generate macroeconomics. And a variable is everything that is negotiable. In this case, it came out and said terms of payment should be changed because you are asking for a long line of credit, but the cost of capital for ConocoPhillips is way below the cost of capital for that supplier. Typically, major corporations have a low cost on the money, and a smaller sub-supplier obviously have a higher cost of capital, right? And anyway, long story short, just by changing one variable, terms of payment, they capitalized $400,000. And I repeat, $400,000 on one variable. It took them, I'm probably exaggerating, less than 10 minutes. And they have created that. So this is just one example where AI will help you in a second. It requires, again, you have to knowledge what you're looking for. So I have to bring out a warning here saying, if you're an unskilled, unexperienced negotiator, AI is not a shortcut because you need to know what you're doing. You need to know what you're looking for. And I do have people coming to me saying, wonderful AI, I don't have to know anything about negotiation. That's a big mistake. That's like you and I jumping into a Formula One car. We don't even have a driver's license. Then we start racing, right? We will probably do quite well for about a minute and it will crash and burn, right? Same thing happens if you don't have the basic skills and understanding of negotiation. But AI is a shortcut when you have that to find information, help you find what you're looking for and just save time in general. And we have a bunch of white papers with cases already where one client after another that by implementing AI could look at existing contract, a new contract, and immediately identify what the value might be. Because you know better than I, when you're sitting with a 120-page contract, it takes time diving through everything there and figuring out where the potential is. But, AI is chewing that up in 9 seconds and giving you the answer.
Absolutely. And you also talked about using it. So that's part of using it to prepare, I guess, is identifying weak spots, areas that can change. Are you using AI during the negotiation itself as well? And if so, how?
That's a great question. Yes and no. It's a great question because you should, and it's a great question because it's really difficult. What I see typically when people trying to utilize AI during negotiation is it requires one individual doing nothing but handling AI. Because you could imagine you're saying something, then I have to dot it in. I have to remember to ask to use the right prompt, and then I have to wait for the reply and then use it in that negotiation. And that becomes tricky when you're negotiating live. Now, AI every day obviously is getting more and more advanced and better and better. So you do have the options already that AI can listen in and it can actually follow and continue and participate in that negotiation live. So you don't even have to sit and type, but it's just basically recording everything that's happening. And that is already now assisting you a lot. So anyway, to answer your question, yes, you should absolutely use AI during negotiations as well.
Okay. And what, I guess, kind of going, you gave us an example of like prompts from before. What kind of prompts are you using during the negotiations?
During the negotiation, one of the things we do, especially if we're recording or listening into what they're saying, is, for instance, to try and identify the emotions. One of the things that's interesting is I meet a lot of people saying, well, AI can't really deal with emotions. No, it can absolutely perfectly. One thing that we're doing all the time is actually reading emails. Again, remove everything confidential, but remove that and then upload, for instance, an email communication stream from somebody and ask, what kind of mood do you read from this? What is the behavior from that individual? How should we reply to that approach from the counterpart? There's another wonderful tool out there called Crystal with a C, which still haven't figured out how it's working. But if you integrate and use Crystal, it can read your LinkedIn profile, and based on the LinkedIn profile, it can identify the DISC profiling. If you know the DISC profiling, it's it's behavioral analysis. So it can see, are you a dominant, influential, steady, or careful individual? And then it can direct and advise you how you should communicate with that individual. I've been testing this hundreds of times, and I would say it's about a 90% hit rate of being correct. So if I was going to have a meeting with you on Monday, I would run Crystal on your LinkedIn profile. It will give me a report about who you are, what you're doing, how you communicate, what you focus on, what is your interest. And then I would know how should I communicate with you in our meeting on Monday. So another area where you should definitely embrace AI.
Now, as you're embracing AI in terms of prepping and then engaging in a negotiation, how do you avoid like data distortion and AI overconfidence?
Oh, yeah. I mean, AI is full of flaws. It can mess up stuff constantly. It can give you false information. It can just create something. I was just reading today, there was a report coming out that OpenAI had basically described why it happens and how you could deal with it. I think as we go forward, AI will get better and better. But basically, the problem today is AI is so willing to serve you and just want to make you happy. So it just goes with whatever. So it's really down to the prompting again. So you have to think about how you're prompting this system correctly. And what I learned to do myself the hard way is actually double checking. So if I have asked AI to do something for me and it comes out with a solution, then I ask it to check it itself. Is that information you gave me factual? Do you have sources? Do you have a link? Where is it? And then it will break down and say, oh, I'm sorry, I made it up. I will find the right information for you right now. So you absolutely have to check and make sure that it's giving you the right information. I would say it's getting better and better and better for every day, but you still have to make sure that the feedback you're getting is correct. I mean, there's been horror stories about attorneys showing up in court and use AI data just to prove something, and it turned out AI had just invented everything, right? So there's a bunch of stories in that already.
I just saw a motion today that you can tell is half written by AI and half written by human. And you can tell which part is which. It reads differently. It's even got spacing different, and it's full of wrong statements. But and the reason I bring that up is, you would agree with me, I know, because this is what you teach, that trust is very, very important in a negotiation. So you have to make sure the data that you're collecting that ultimately you're going to use is accurate, even if you're using AI, right? Okay.
Oh, absolutely. No doubt about it. That's why I'm saying that you have to make sure, obviously, that the information you're getting is correct. So make sure, check it, what information you're getting, and even ask AI to check itself.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's overlooked so often. And obviously, I know the point of our discussion is not as much AI, but it's changing everything, including negotiation. And doctor, look, I'm not so silly as to think that negotiation's an easy topic where 2 or 3 things you can do and suddenly be a master negotiator. But if you only had, let's say, a subway ride with someone and you wanted to leave them as a better negotiator than you found them, what would be some quick advice you'd give them to get them on the right path?
Yeah, that's a great question. I hope it's a long ride. Anyway, to make it short, I would say the ability to listen, and what I mean by listening is really listening, not just picking up the words, but the value behind the word. I often say to my students and client, don't listen to the word, but listen to replace the sound of the word with the sound of a cash register. And what I mean by that is, if you have a counterpart coming to you and say, I would like to change delivery time, just to use that example again, then you shouldn't go into the argumentation saying that's not possible. It will cost us money. We are not interested in doing that. You shouldn't be concessional either and say, okay, that's great, let's do it. You should ask a question. And the question should be, what is the financial impact for you if we do that? Because you know what, throughout history, um, two organizations have only negotiated because they want to create and distribute value. That's the only reason two companies has ever negotiated. So when a negotiator raises a topic, there is most of the time a financial impact. That's the reason they do it. And your challenge as a negotiator is figuring out what is that value or what is that cost. Back to the asymmetric idea, right? So if I should just give you one advice, it's listening. And I'm also saying that because we're actually losing the ability to really listen. What happens today is, in many cases, that is, we're only listening to prepare our own argumentation. So we're not really picking up what the counterpart is saying. I see this every week, unfortunately, among very educated people. They're basically just planning, what should I do now? How can I counter argue on what the counterpart said? So they're not really picking up that value. And it's a very sensitive thing, because obviously, in most cases, as a negotiator, you're not stepping into a negotiation and saying, do you know what, Keld? If we change delivery time, I'll make $1 million. That's not happening. But you will say, I would like to change delivery time. And then it's my assignment figuring out, why do you want to do it? What's the value? And obviously, what is my cost? So does it make sense doing it? So that was a long story just to tell you the ability to listen is crucial. Curiosity and the ability to listen is crucial to be a great negotiator.
I think I could not agree more, Doctor. And, you know, one of the greatest gifts I think I've ever been given is learning how to actually listen in a world where people simply be quiet while they think about what they want to say next. And there's a very big difference there. Doctor, you've been great. I promised I would be sensitive with your very valuable time. You didn't make me negotiate too hard to get it, so I appreciate that. But before you do go, I'd like you to leave us with one last thing. What does it mean to you, Doctor, to level up?
I would say to level up is basically understanding the importance of a topic, in this case, negotiation, and be better at it. I see a lot of great negotiators out in the real world, but I also see a lot of people who need to level up. And you know, it's funny, when we run simulations, we have several groups running the same simulation, just like the AI study we did. They have the same time to prepare, the same time to conduct that negotiation, but every single time, and I promise you, every single time, they end up with very different result. The exact same time, the same concept, the same everything. The only ingredients that is different is the human beings involved in that. Same thing happens in reality. You replace one individual with another, and suddenly you made another $8 million. So I'm talking about people have to level up. They have to get the skill. They have to get the training. They have to get the knowledge. And do you know what? To be honest, I'm still scared in 2025 that you have executives that are sending negotiators out, negotiating for millions of dollars, that have no idea on what they're doing. So that's level up to me.
Could not agree more. Doctor, we're going to put all your information in the show notes. So if any of you are interested in contacting Dr. Jensen, he does have clients. He does provide advice, as well as 27 different publications and tons of other resources available. So if you are interested in leveling up that skill and becoming the best negotiator you can be, given that your business literally depends on it, feel free to give Dr. Jensen a shout. And again, Doctor, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
I'd like to thank Dr. Keld Jensen for joining us on the podcast. Negotiation is such a difficult topic because lots of people think they're really good at it, but most people, frankly, have no clue what they're doing. They just go in and demand their position until they get something they're happy with. That is not the way to maximize negotiation. Yes, these people are talking about millions and billions, but I don't care what size your claim is. All of this applies. So start with the process, work your way through the steps, and check out some of Dr. Jensen's guidance. Take your negotiation to the next level. Follow us on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast player.